Hi, I'm Luke Hanson McDonald. I'm the second generation president of my family office, HandMac Capital, and this is my podcast about family business. Today's interview is with serial entrepreneur Glen Creaser. He built and sold his first tech business, a company called Affino.io, 2 years out of university. Glen is an engineer by background, but he comes from a long line of fishermen. I actually know Glen because our fathers were both familiar with each other when they worked in the seafood industry. So Glen sits down with us today to discuss his latest business venture, Larry's Catch. This is a disruptive, direct-to-consumer seafood business focused on the Ontario market. So Glen and his business partners are leveraging their experience in the tech industry and his family's legacy in the fishing industry to deliver high-quality, sustainably sourced seafood to the Ontario market in a way that's never been done before. This is an interesting story about how the next generation may go in their own direction and get their own experience, but ultimately may loop around and come up with a fresh set of eyes approach to disrupt the legacy family business. You're not going to want to miss this one. This is Beyond the Family Business podcast. Let's jump into it. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
$1 million, 3 questions. All right. So I'm Glen Creaser. I grew up in Chester, Nova Scotia. My entire family on both sides resides from either Lunenburg, Nova Scotia or Riverport, Nova Scotia. Although I moved to Ontario almost 10 years ago, which is crazy, my heart never left. And, who knows if another 10 years from now, I'm sure I'll probably be somewhere in salty air back on the East Coast. So we'll see about that. In terms of what I do, still trying to figure that out, to be honest. Right now, I'm a seafood entrepreneur. I run a direct-to-consumer seafood delivery business in Ontario, and got a couple other things going on, but that's really my main focus at the moment.
Okay, cool. And so that's Larry's Catch is what you're talking about.
Yes.
So could you give us first sort of a more detailed overview of what is Larry's Catch today?
Yeah, so today Larry's Catch is a seafood delivery business serving most of southern Ontario. As far as Niagara, London, sort of Oshawa, and as far north as Barrie. Mm-hmm. We have plans to expand beyond that, but for now that's kind of where our focus is. Mm-hmm. And it might seem kind of crazy just to start a seafood business in Ontario because there are so many other seafood companies, and over time, I think the brand of seafood has been a little bit tarnished in Ontario. It's very much been known as kind of like the dumping ground for,
Yeah, when I lived here, it was always a pain point for me, like having grown up on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. I always had access to like incredible seafood, and you kind of just take it for granted, to be honest.
Exactly.
And then, you go out and get sushi or whatever, and so often it's like, either clearly old and kind of fishy tuna or whatever, or you go to the supermarket and it's like clearly frozen farmed from, Thailand or something like that, right?
Yeah, and it's always some, environmentally disastrous country, and you have no idea if it's farmed, if it's wild, if it was farmed, how was it farmed? What are you putting in your body? You really have no idea. Mm-hmm. And so there's really no option for the ethical consumer to find high quality fish. Mm-hmm. And then there's no option for, someone like you and I who has come here and has completely almost cut seafood out of their diet as a result. So that was kind of my main, driving factor to start Larry's Catch out here.
How does Larry's Catch get its product to its customers?
Yeah, so we have a cold storage facility here.
Yeah.
We buy directly from Canadian fishermen, and we make sure that we focus only on Canadians so that we can really trace back from, to exactly where the seafood came from. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it's all flash frozen. I am a firm believer on if you're eating seafood in Ontario, You should never buy something that has never been frozen. There's
Yeah.
just, unless it teleported here, there's just no chance it's any better in quality. That's been a very common myth that has been believed here. And if you've ever been inside of, a fish store or in the fish section of a grocery store where things are thawed, it is one of the worst places to be in. It just smells so bad.
Yep.
It's less convenient for yourself because you're in a rush to eat it when you purchase it. And in these days technology, with IQF, like individual quick freezing, there's no reason that you should be buying never frozen.
Can you explain what is IQF?
Yeah, so IQF is a flash freezing technology where the seafood is laid out sort of in an individual piece. So if it's scallops, it would be, it's not a bunch of scallops smushed together, and so that when it's frozen, they're all stuck together. It's all frozen on a conveyor belt extremely quickly, and it really locks in the freshness and the flavor the way the seafood really should be from the moment it's caught.
Yeah.
So to circle back to sort of what Larry's Catch is, the way we really differentiate from, any other fish store here is, as I mentioned before, it's all Canadian sourced seafood. So we buy directly from Canadian fisher families. And we're very much a lifestyle brand rather than just seafood. Every single fishmonger just says, we have fresh seafood. Our seafood's better than the neighbors. But in my opinion, the seafood brand has been tarnished so badly in Ontario that you need to take it a step beyond that to build trust with your customers. So we offer recipe recommendations. We really hold your hand along your entire seafood journey. We offer a seafood concierge service where you can ask us basically any question about seafood, whether it be cooking recommendations, where it came from, how you should thaw your fish. If you're looking for something that we don't necessarily offer, we can point you in the right direction. And then to add on to that sort of lifestyle side of the business, we want to help people add seafood back into their diet and back into their routine because it is so good for you. There's many studies that show that it can help with longevity. It helps avoid certain types of cancer, helps with your mental health, your brain, your eyes. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
So we offer a subscription service where we automatically ship you a box of seafood every up to your choice, but typically it would be every month, so that you can just set it and forget it. And we essentially ensure that you're keeping high quality seafood in your diet.
Cool. I can hear the passion coming through what you're saying, and having been, in a fisher family, as you put it before, myself, working in the seafood industry, I completely agree with your comments about IQF and the tarnishing or the almost misinformation around like what makes good seafood. And then people pay a lot of money and then they're unhappy with the experience and they think, seafood's not for them. Like I, even growing up, I didn't think I liked seafood because I would often associate it with like sort of canned tuna, fishy salmon, like, not fresh seafood. And then as I got older and started to really try fresh seafood, it's such an amazing part of my diet now. So I completely get you on that. Could you speak a little bit about what is MSC? I know that's a big part of what you guys focus on, and what that means.
MSC stands for Marine Stewardship Council.
Yeah.
And they essentially look at harvesting operations under a very precise microscope and ensure that your fishing practices are, in fact, sustainable, for future years to come, to help further generations continue to carry on these practices. So to not overfish the resource, to handle the fish in a way that's not wasteful, ensure that you're not dumping fish. So really just to optimize and respect the resource that we've been given in our oceans.
Having, again, worked in the seafood industry, one of the challenges I found was that there's been so much misinformation, as you pointed out. Every fishmonger can sort of say, hey, it's fresh, sustainable seafood. Like, you go to Red Lobster and it probably says sustainably caught or whatever. But then there's no chain of custody or no proof. How have you guys, educated your consumer on that? How are you showing you're not just another person who claims they're the most sustainable option, they're the, the one that's the best for the environment, et cetera?
So it really comes down to social media, to be honest. It's been a very interesting journey, and I'm not sure I really signed up for becoming a quote-unquote seafood aficionado, especially on the internet. Influencer, that might be taken a little bit too far. But yeah, so I really wasn't expecting that, but it has been really great for getting our message across, building trust with our customers and our audience. And I'd be very interested to see what my grandfather, who is a longtime fishing captain, would think if he saw the way I was pushing this business. I think he'd be a little confused as to why I'm doing it, but at the end of the day, it really does work. And in this day and age, it's super important to leverage the platforms that are available to you. So we really do. There's a lot of humor on there. If you've ever seen our Instagram or our TikTok or things like that. But that's really to hook the audience. And then we do try to sprinkle in as much education here and there as we possibly can. So you will see little tidbits, little facts about seafood, how easy it really is to cook. Facts about the sustainability of Canadian seafood, and yeah, different things like that. So our initiative really is social media centric, and it has been a very large contributor to our growth thus far.
Very cool. No, I mean that makes a lot of sense. You got to get to people in an authentic way, and I mean traditional seafood mongers are certainly not making TikToks, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So again, you have a lot of passion for this. You've already spoken to the fact or alluded to the fact you have a family legacy in the seafood industry. Could you speak a bit about that family legacy?
So if you look at my grandfather, he started fishing when he was 14. He had a very, very long career, basically until he couldn't fish anymore.
And what was he fishing?
He was fishing. He was actually a dory fisherman back in the day.
Wow.
On longliners. He was sword fishing. Very dangerous, fascinating conditions. I couldn't imagine some of the things that he's seen and some of the things that he's been through. Getting lost at sea in the fog in a dory and not knowing if you're ever going to be picked back up.
For people that don't know it, what is a dory?
So a dory is essentially a small rowboat. And if you Google Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, really any fishing town, you'll probably see a photo of a dory. They're these little wooden rowboats, typically painted red, I think for visibility, easy to spot in the ocean. And they're essentially dropped in the water by schooners where you're basically left out at sea to go fishing.
And you're like hundreds of miles or, at least tens of miles offshore.
Exactly.
First of all, in a schooner, and then second of all, being dropped off in these little, dories, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah, exactly. So swordfish, I'd say, was one of his primary resources. And when my father actually started fishing with my grandfather, he was 12 years old. And they went out sword fishing together. And the funny thing is, I think every single generation of fishermen in my family was hoping that the generation after them wouldn't have to fish anymore.
It's a tough life.
It is a tough life. I've heard some pretty horrifying stories of being out there, especially the farther you go back. The schooner days, as I mentioned. But even, when my father was fishing, there were a lot of very close calls. They did a lot of their longline fishing on vessels from overseas that were very narrow and tall and not really built for the types of seas that we would get over on the Western Atlantic. So, they're much more equipped for calmer seas, and
Sure.
these vessels are at very high risk of, capsizing the types of seas that they had. You'd be out for a month at a time in some of the rockiest conditions. And, if it were me, I'd be kissing land as soon as I got back. So, some of the stories are just incredible, and I really commend every single fisherman who ever goes out to sea.
It is. I was lucky enough to get to work with fishermen when I was working in our family business, and they are like the toughest, hardest working people I've ever met. Like, some of my biggest mentors in my life are people that were fishermen, as captains or worked on fishing vessels. So I completely agree. So your dad was a fisherman, and even your brother was a fisherman.
Yes. So my dad, as I mentioned, he started his career at around 12. He continued that until he was in university. He was actually in university to become a school teacher. I think I think his goal was to become a gym teacher, but he quickly dropped out and went back to fishing. I think it really is truly a passion. That's genuinely what he wanted to do. It's what he became used to. It's what his friends were doing. It's what his family has done for generations, and I think he just feels an immense attachment to that. So he went back. He started scallop fishing for a very long time, and then his soon-to-be father-in-law actually took him aside and sort of convinced him to start something of his own.
Yeah.
So he worked with his uncle, who was just a bank branch manager at BMO in Bridgewater.
Yeah.
And he somehow managed to get a loan to buy his first vessel and get into ground fishing. So when he bought this vessel, it was actually very interesting timing. It was when the individual transferable quota system was just introduced. So before that, there was just a total allowable catch, and may the best man win out in the oceans. They'd catch fish until this limit was reached, and whoever caught the most fish won.
As quick as possible.
So the seasons were really short.
And you can also imagine the impact on quality when you're effectively racing to get as much fish in your boat.
Exactly. And the problem with this was that it really encouraged vessels to end up dumping fish if they went over this total allowable catch, because they'd be fined really badly if they came to shore with too much fish. And so that's the reason why they introduced the individual transferable quota, amongst other reasons, but I believe that's the main driving reason.
Sure.
And so the inshore fleet of vessels, which is what my dad was part of, quickly shrank from about 300 vessels to around 100. So my father got into the game kind of just at the start of that, when things were really starting to shift and things were beginning to consolidate, because so many fishermen were being bought out, because you needed to actually own quota. You needed to own your proportion of that total allowable catch. So that's when it really became a strategic business and not just going out and catching as much fish as possible. You needed to actually own your allotment of fish that you're allowed to catch. So over that time, I think in my father's entire career, he owned about 17 or 18 vessels, never more than 2 at a time, I think. The reason he would buy so many vessels is because no fisherman wanted to sell their quota and still have a boat left over. What are they going to do with it? They can't fish with it. So he would have to buy the vessel that came with the quota to allow himself to catch more fish, and then he would either use the vessel or flip it. So that's what he did for years. He had a great few years, and then one of his best investments, in my eyes, I think he would attest to this, was actually a diversification play to kind of reduce his risks. He kind of had all of his eggs in the groundfish basket. And when the government, controls what you're doing, it's nice to be a little bit more diversified. So he bought crab and shrimp licenses in the early 2000s, just so he had it, just in case. And then he ended up selling those in 2015 for quite a return on the value of those quotas. So it was almost accidental, but it was a very smart business move at the time, in order to make sure he's diversified and sort of all of his bases are covered in a very uncertain industry.
Sure. You've gone your own path. And so, you've gone down this road of starting a business, but obviously there's been a big influence of this, tremendous legacy. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure as well, of all the people that came before you. How has that, legacy in the seafood industry benefited you and influenced you in this current business?
Yeah. So, you mentioned pressure. I think the only pressure I really had was pressure I put on myself. I've been very blessed in my upbringing, that I was never put in a box. I was never told what to do with my life. And I think my father, just like his father and his father's father and so on, didn't necessarily want me to be a fisherman. I think my attachment to the industry, and the reason I've kind of always known that I wanted to do something in the fishing industry is because it's the community that has supported my family for generations. And I know that there are so many other families exactly like mine that have been supported by this industry. And I want to do whatever I can to make sure that those communities continue to be supported. And I think the best way to do that is actually, get that fish out there, get people eating it, get people wanting it, especially with these tariffs coming up. Who knows what's actually going to happen, but, with over 50% of our exports going to the US, there will be a need for demand elsewhere. So I feel like I'm doing my part there. But yeah, just to loop back, I've sold fish since 2015. Sorry, that's wrong. I sold fish ever since I was 15 years old. Actually, sorry.
You've sold fish for a while.
I've sold fish for a very long time. I did it as sort of a high school gig. As soon as I got my license, I started delivering fish door to door. I did get out of sort of my focus on seafood for a little while. And the main reason for that was because I didn't really want to be pigeonholed in my way of thinking. I wanted to kind of expand horizons, experience new things, see what's happening in other industries, so that, I could be better equipped to, innovate in a rather traditional space. So
the industry needs people like you that are going to bring a new perspective to, how do you, as you already spoke to, how do you educate people on what makes Atlantic Canadian or any Canadian seafood special? Sustainability, the quality of it, whatever. But that traditional element, sometimes means that maybe they haven't progressed enough yet on, how do they deal with the complex marketing that exists, online now. And it sounds like you're helping bring that value, which is hugely needed.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, at the end of the day, to your original question, how was I influenced into this? My company is named Larry's Catch for a reason. None of this would have happened without him. I would have had no connection to the seafood industry. I wouldn't have been able to lead a life outside of fishing if he wasn't so if he wasn't so encouraging for me to expand my horizons and allow me to make my own decisions and things. So I consider myself extremely blessed to have someone so open-minded as a father and really allow me to take things into my own hands and make my own decisions, so to speak.
Absolutely. So speaking of which, I mean, the Larry's Catch business makes a lot more sense, at least from an outside where you came from the fishing family, etc. But it wasn't your first entrepreneurial venture. You had another business, Afino, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yep.
Can you tell me, first of all, what was that business, or what is that business?
Yeah. So again, I didn't really want to put myself in a box. I wanted to get out there and dip my toes into different industries, primarily tech. That's where the most innovation happens. Sure. And that's really what was exciting me. So when I graduated high school, I went to Queen's University to pursue engineering. I was in robotics engineering. Haven't really used the robotics side of things so much, but when I graduated, it was during the pandemic. And myself, along with 3 other very good buddies, decided there was no better time to, stick out our necks and try to start a business. So we got into an incubator program that Queen's University ran, where they gave us a bit of seed funding, some mentorship, and we could really take a crack at starting a business. So we landed on the world of remote work. Very timely. There was a big trend and a big switch in the world where people were shifting towards remote work. And it turned out to be essentially a platform that would help remote employees maintain their culture, get to know each other better, especially for new hires who wouldn't have an opportunity to do anything in person with their coworkers. Help them really connect and ensure that they're still enjoying the work, and it did kind of turn into like an HR tech company. The biggest problem there was retention. There's a lot more turnover when you're less attached to your company.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that was kind of what we were aiming to do. We were aiming to help employees just enjoy their workplace a little bit more, help them connect with one another better. And that was through different events and games, like virtual events and games that employees could do with one another. It was different prompts and sort of coffee chats that our software would our software would induce. And yeah, we worked on that for about 2 years. We kind of decided working 14-hour days, really grinding at this software and really trying to push this business. It was very difficult when it was in a world we weren't necessarily passionate about. And
that's a big thing I hear a lot on this show, is that people are, and I can attest to this personally, you often like run after some idea early on. Sometimes it's random. Sometimes, as you said, you saw an opportunity in the market. Sometimes you get pushed into something because of expectations that are either real or you imagine them. But where you really find success is once you actually can find something that you actually are really passionate about and you love, and then you can really dedicate yourself to. And as you said, the 14-hour days, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So whatever you're doing, like, it's going to take years, decades for you to become incredible at it. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately we were able to build enough value in this company to, pique the interest, for an acquisition. So there was a larger company that did something very similar. They didn't have a subscription model, and they were looking to have sort of a more software-centric, recurring revenue model. So it was a very good opportunity for them to actually acquire our company. We had some really cool customers. We had Sunwing, Loopio, which is one of the sort of fastest growing startups in Toronto. Willful, which is a really cool one that was on Dragon's Den, Freshie, and things like that. So very cool customers to help their brand. We had a subscription model, everything already built. Yes, we were very lucky that we didn't just give up. We were actually able to sell the company and have that brand continue on, and sort of our baby, so to speak, could continue to grow, which is really cool to see. And it was an amazing experience, especially 2 years out of university to go through that acquisition process. It was surreal, really.
Amazing.
It was amazing.
It's a hell of an achievement to be able to say that you've built and sold a tech company within 2 years out of university. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, COVID made it easy. Yeah. Honestly, there was nothing else to do. We were tucked away in a cottage in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia for most of the time.
Yeah.
And we had enough sort of land that we could go out and swing a golf club every once in a while, and other than that we were just working the whole time. To loop back to your point on passion, I actually talked to your father before starting Afino, just asking for a little bit of advice, and that was one of the main things that he said is there's no point in doing it if you're not passionate about it. At that time I believed that all of my passion was just in working and starting a company with my friends, which I am still passionate about. And that's what I'm still doing right now. My two co-founders, two guys that I actually started Afino with, I'm still starting a company with my friends, but the work that I'm actually doing, I'm passionate about as well, which is really, really important.
So they are the founders also of Larry's Catch with you.
Exactly.
And you live together.
And we live together.
Yeah.
So it is, we haven't torn each other's heads off yet, which is pretty astounding.
You're recreating the COVID isolation, but now in Toronto, even though you're allowed to leave your house, you've decided to still live together. So.
Crazy. I sometimes question it, but it
obviously works.
It's working, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, starting a company with those guys. We're still very close with the fourth founder of Afino as well. It's been a blessing to find some like-minded folks that are willing to take that risk with you.
So is it fair to say, because one of the things that I know personally from our own family, but also from talking to other people who have sold their business, it's always it can be a bittersweet moment, but it sounds like you recognized you were ready for that change to focus on something like Larry's Catch. Yeah. So is that fair to say you've relished the moment to now go in a new direction?
Yeah, exactly. I think when we sold Afino, we knew it wasn't over. So we did go work in tech for a little bit. I worked for a restaurant tech company called Touch Bistro. Then moved on to work for an agriculture tech sort of supply chain focused company called Silo, based out of San Francisco. I was working remote in Toronto, though, and we eventually got to the point where we said, okay, what's next? We've gotten this new experience. We've matured as professionals. We've learned a ton. What are we going to do next? And at that point, I was still running the company that I ran since high school every summer. So I was selling seafood through basically through email and then delivering it around the South Shore of Nova Scotia. And we decided there's a market for this. Yeah. We have a proven model in Nova Scotia where the need is nowhere near as dire as it is in Ontario. Why don't we take this model that's clearly solving a problem in Nova Scotia and take it to a place where that problem is so much larger? And to take it back to the passion thing, I loved doing that business. And I don't know why it didn't click earlier that that's what I should be doing full time. And like I said, your father gave me the advice to do what I'm passionate about. My father would never consider himself a businessman. He is simply a person who did what he was passionate about. And he, he still dreams of fishing every single night. He doesn't fish anymore, but like that, he's told me that every single night he goes to sleep, he dreams of fishing in the most positive light possible. Yeah. So I've learned, if you're passionate about something, just do it. Yeah. The success can come second, but just do what you're passionate about. Yeah. And it won't feel like work, which is amazing, but also you're gonna find at least a little bit of success in it if you take the right angles and you don't put yourself in a box and you think of how do I innovate on what I'm passionate about. So
how has your time at Afino, or how did your time at Afino and also in the other two tech companies you worked in, how did that influence Larry's Catch? Have you carried over some level of tech, presumably, since it's a SaaS model business, et cetera?
Yeah. So my two co-founders and myself have never worked in direct to consumer. We've always been in B2B. And so we very much treat this company, we treat Larry's Catch like a B2B software as a service company. So we have a subscription model. We create recurring revenue. We service our customers highly. Like we consider every single subscription a contract, and we are extremely, extremely analytical in the way that we run our business. So in the two companies that I was working at before, I was a business analyst. So very heavy on the data side. I have one of my co-founders, Javier. He worked in a trucking logistics startup as a product manager. So he has very vast experience in sort of understanding customer needs, listening to the customer, turning that into an offering, and really packaging that whole thing. So he's very, very close to the tech side and the customer experience side. And then my other co-founder, James, he worked in influencer marketing through the entire time in between Afino and Larry's Catch. So he was on the sales side of things, so it's great to have a salesperson in your founding team.
What business was that? Was that Dash Hudson?
It was called #Paid. Okay. Yeah, so based out of Toronto.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, it's great to have a salesperson on your team. Yeah. But none of us had experience in marketing, so it's very, very nice to have him who at least understands the influencer marketing side of things and understands how to get, ROI on your marketing spend, and, understands all of the different strategies, all the alternatives to influencer marketing. So he has a very good understanding of that. So we had a good baseline in marketing as well. So all these things translated very well into how we run Larry's Catch. Our website isn't just kind of a display case. It really is something that we look at, and we look at the journey that the customer goes through when they're on our website. We do focus groups to understand how customers see our website and how they digest the information that's on there. And so, yeah, I mean, in summary, we really treat this like exactly like the companies that we worked for. Just in a sort of slightly more translated into a direct-to-consumer scope.
Cool. It's interesting that you all, after Afino, went in different directions, and then those different skill sets you picked up in different businesses have all now been super valuable to this business. So it's funny how things work out that way. We're getting close to the end here. Two things I wanted to touch on. One was, you now work also with your brother, or maybe you've always worked partially with your brother, but you mentioned to me before that you're doing a couple things with him as well. What's the experience like working with a sibling for you, and sort of how do you find that balance?
So my brother Mark and I, we have very complementary skill sets. We don't share the same brain whatsoever. We grew up having different experiences. Mark started fishing when he was 14. I unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to fish with my father. I actually didn't touch on this, but he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the early 2000s. So my brother got to fish with him in his last years of fishing until he kind of became landlocked as a result of the disease. And then I never really came to the age in time to be able to go fishing with my father. So he has that experience. He spent his entire life on the water doing something nautical. That's what he went to school for. And, you know, I went more of a landlocked route. I you know, took engineering. I have a very sort of problem-solving mindset, and my brother very much has a strategic mindset. He's always thinking into the future. He's thinking future state. How do we get there? And I can sort of help solve that problem.
Yeah.
And
which is a great combo, because you often see it with great partnerships where you have sort of the long-term, you know, I don't want to say visionary, but strategic long-term view. But then you need somebody who's actually going to get you there as an operator, and somebody who's going to, as you said, problem solving. And engineers are so good at analytical problem solving. So that's a great combo.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I've been very impressed with what my brother has been able to accomplish with some of the problems that he faces. I swear he can turn water to wine if you give him a little bit of time. Like, it's amazing what he has been able to accomplish while working with my father, while working for other fisheries. He's an extremely good asset. And he's got a very vast network, very well respected, and especially in the fishery world. And that's been able to really help me with Larry's Catch, because if I have a problem, if I need a resource, if I need to talk to someone, I only need to talk to my brother. Like, he is such an asset, because if any problem that I have, I just mention it to him, and he's got a solution, which is also amazing. So I think it's very important that I shout him out, because for Larry's Catch specifically, he hasn't asked for a dime. He hasn't asked for anything in return. And truly, I believe none of this could have happened without him. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's great that you have such a good relationship. Do you ever fight?
Here and there. We spent some time apart. He went away for school, and then he was working on vessels for a long time. So we did a lot of fighting when we spent all of our time together.
Yeah.
And then we kind of went our separate ways a bit, came back, and we have a lot more respect for one another now.
Yeah.
We definitely do have disagreements,
yeah.
for sure. I mean, we spend a lot of time together. We definitely put our heads together a lot, and sometimes they might butt a little bit, but for the most part, we're pretty good at getting along. I think we understand each other's strengths and weaknesses really well. So
it's funny how that happens. Me and my brother were the same thing, like constantly fighting growing up, and then spent a bunch of time apart. And now we're very, very close. So it's funny how time does that to a person.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, speaking to your brother's intelligence, and also his willingness to speak the truth. I taught him sailing when I was younger, and I remember the very first day of sailing lessons, I was teaching him about tacking or something like that, which is called a sailing maneuver. And your brother was a good single-handed sailor, and I was from the world of double-handed sailing, so sailing with two people on a boat versus one. And I was explaining some methodology of tacking, and your brother at this point was, I don't know how old, 12, and he like called me out in front of the whole class and was like, "That's not correct. That's the outdated way of doing this. This is the way to do it." And I was just like, "Oh shit, this kid knows more than me."
He's not afraid to call something out. Like okay. One way I would summarize the way the two of us work together is he is very, very street smart and in tune with his like his gut and the way things actually work. I am definitely very by the book which has a lot of downfalls and isn't always
flexible.
Yeah, it doesn't always make the most sense.
Yeah.
It isn't always the most practical.
Yeah.
So he definitely keeps me in check a little bit by, making sure I'm not too by the book, because I kind of need that every once in a while.
No, 100%. My brother is very, I would say he's not a conformist. He doesn't like following, the pack, whereas I'm almost like, I really like looking at like where is society going, and that sort of drives me towards where I'm going. So it's a healthy balance to be like reminded, you shouldn't always just be thinking about like what's the next trend. You should actually be thinking about the counter trend.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost. So we're out of time, but the last comment or last question I had was, can you explain what are the products that you sell at Larry's Catch and where can people find them?
Thought you'd never ask. So like I said before, it's all Canadian seafood. We sell fin fish, we sell shellfish, for example, halibut, haddock, tuna, scallops, lobster, you name it. If it's Canadian, we probably offer it. And you can find us at larryscatch.com. You can do a one-off order, create your own box, or you can subscribe and we'll send you either a curated box or you can pick and choose what you're looking for. And we just help you make sure that there's always seafood in your diet. So we'll deliver that to your door. You can set it and forget it. And you don't have to use our website too. If you don't like doing that, just give me a call. It's going to be me. It's going to be either myself, Javier, or James on the other end. We're humans and we just want to help you out. So we very much run our business on a personal level, not just a website. We're happy to help out if we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Glenn.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care. All right. Thank you so much for watching. This is Beyond the Family Business Podcast. Please like and subscribe. All right. Talk to you soon.